The modern attack surface is vast and permeable, extending from the data center to the cloud and device edge. Security teams are stretched thinner and thinner as they try to cover this ground. The result? More high-profile breaches hit the news every day. Don't let your organization be next. ExtraHop delivers security from the inside out, helping enterprise security teams detect threats up to 95% faster and cut staff time to resolve by 2/3 or more. Act with confidence. Learn more at extrahop.com/securityweekly. Effectively securing your organization and its reputation requires a smarter approach. To maximize efficiency and minimize risk, security experts turn to LogRhythm, the only leading solution built solely for security teams by a security team committed to your success. With Next-Gen SIEM, user and entity behavior analytics, network traffic and behavior analysis, security automation and orchestration, and compliance, LogRhythm provides security made smarter.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian. Major data security breaches continue to make headlines. Are you prepared? Standardizing your security framework will help you stay competitive, be a reliable business partner, and manage intellectual property, financials, and employee and customer information. The American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, offers the standards you need in one place through standard subscriptions, a cost-saving, fully customizable solution. Learn more at securityweekly.com/ANSI. SecureWorld Boston is hosting their 15th annual conference, March 27th and 28th at the Heinz Convention Center. Security Weekly listeners save $100 off a full conference pass by visiting secureworldexpo.com and using the discount code SecurityWeekly. Also, we just released our 2019 Security Weekly 25 Index Survey. Please go to securityweekly.com and click the survey link to help us understand who's evaluating, using, or formerly used any of the Security Weekly 25 companies. The results will be summarized and presented back to all responders in a private webcast. All right, now we get to our second interview. Bruce Sussman is Media Development Director for SecureWorld. He is an Emmy-winning journalist and former TV meteorologist who travels the country interviewing InfoSec leaders and researchers who speak at SecureWorld's 17 regional conferences around North America. You can also find him moderating panels or speaking on how to improve communication in InfoSec. Bruce, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you so much, Matt. It is great to be here from out in Portland, Oregon, and glad I made it through a snowstorm this morning of about 1 inch of snow, but that usually shuts down Portland. We're not like those of you back east who can handle that stuff.
Now, as a former meteorologist, I have to ask you the question, did you predict a 1 inch of snow or no? Because it's the only job I know in the world where you can be wrong 80% of the time and you still have a job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, that's 50% of the time. So we want to get the stats right. No, it's a great question. I try to stay out of the forecast business now since I'm not getting paid to do that. It is high risk. But yeah, you can bet that a lot of people at the office and around town asked my opinion. And I just said, it's cold enough for snow. I just don't know how much moisture we're going to get. And again, we just had an inch. So it was no big deal here. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, just a meteorologist. I mean, they've guessed the weather wrong at least 4 times already this year in Colorado. So
I believe it.
Yeah, but on their 50% mark, they're doing pretty good. So
that's right. Well, actually, people did ask me, how did you go from meteorology to InfoSec? And I said, I was just looking for a role where I could be a little more accurate.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. This one will give you a little more of that. So let's preview SecureWorld Boston, right? I mean, that's the next conference coming up for SecureWorld. We'll actually be up there. Paul and I will be up there joining you folks up at SecureWorld. So I wanted to preview a little bit some of the big topics that will be covered up in Boston in a few weeks.
Yeah, and if we can I give just a brief overview first, and then we can dive into some of those?
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So if you've never been to SecureWorld Boston, I mean, it's the largest cybersecurity conference in the region. This is year 15, as you said, Matt, a couple of minutes ago, and it's coming up in late March. And as far as size goes, it's still very manageable, but it is big. We have more than 100 vendor partners who will be there in the networking pavilion. We have over 50 sessions on the agenda. And of course, we have the Security Weekly podcast team, right? So it's going to be excellent. And this year, I think we're also promising better weather. I know, Paul, you were there last year at SecureWorld Boston, and do you remember what happened the day before the event?
Well, very vividly, because for whatever reason, we decided to walk from our hotel to where it was, or we decided to walk, right? Which after there's been like a ton of snow dumped in Boston, it's not a good time to go for a walk because we walked the wrong way. My shoes were wet. It was cold. It was bad. Yeah, there was.
Yeah,
there
so
was
you
some
do
snow.
remember that. Oh yeah, very fond memories. And this is the amazing thing is it was 13 inches of snow the day before the conference. And so we wondered as a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is anybody going to make it out to the conference? And it turns out we had more than 1,000 security leaders and their teams show up anyway. And that was very humbling for us. But I was asking some people, why did you make the effort, right, in the middle of snowstorms, even though Boston cleans up nicely, but it still
did,
takes
yeah.
Right.
Right.
And James Beeson, who's the CISO at Cigna, I think he kind of encapsulated it for me anyway, because I was talking to him about threat landscape and some other things. But I said, why Secure World? And why do you think so many people come out? And he said, number one, it's the networking, of course, since it's a regional conference. So he has peers that he can network with and then call on when he needs help. But the second thing he said that he likes is that because of the size, he can speak to vendors in rapid fashion. And that way he knows who he and his team want follow-up appointments with versus doing that in reverse, where you're halfway through an hour-long appointment and you realize this isn't going to be a fit with our organization. So he called it a time saver. So anyway, we're very humbled that this is year 15.
Now, Bruce, to both of his points, that's exactly the value that I get out of the show. Because I go there, it's a regional show, and not just for me, but like regionally, I speak with CISOs, practitioners, but also security vendors and all the people that work there, right? Like not just the marketing or sales, but some of the sales engineers and technical folks are there too presenting. So it's that. And then the second thing that I really like is like the size is just perfect for that. Like it's not the RSA, it's really hard. Like I had to go through my list today of like, I'm not going to do briefings with this company. And just because not because I don't like them, right? And I feel bad, but there's
nothing
just
personal.
Yeah, there's just not enough time, or I've done a briefing with them before, or whatever. But obviously, they've got something they want to communicate at RSA. So, and it's not so small. You go to some of the smaller shows, and there's not as much of a selection typically of vendors. I like SecureWorld for those two reasons because it's the perfect size. You can still talk to people. There's still a number of vendors there that you, like you said, you can kind of go, I'm like, are they solving problems for people or not? Maybe I can help make that determination for ourselves and our listeners at the show. And so I completely agree on those 2 points. That's very well
great.
said.
Well, thank you for that feedback. That's fantastic. That's the kind of thing we've been hearing. So that's excellent. So now that's kind of an overview of the 2-day conference. So Matt, back to your question about who are some of the key speakers of note. And first of all, our opening keynote this year, I'm really excited about this. This is Steve Brown, and he is the former Intel futurist and former chief evangelist there. And he's traveled around the world, think about that, for Intel on their behalf, doing research, speaking. He knows a lot about the future and where we are headed. And he's actually speaking on what he calls the next wave of digital transformation. And he is talking about how this is going to be intimately involved in changing the way business and security operate. And just to go down the list of things that he's looking at when he talks about technological changes, he lists sensors, analytics, artificial intelligence, of course, robotics, augmented reality, 5G networking, and also blockchain. And the way he paints the picture during a session, first of all, it's a really fun session. I had a chance to see him speak at SecureWorld Seattle in the fall, where he was the keynote. That's our West Coast flagship conference. And he's talking about the revolution, right? You have the industrial revolution over here, and then you have like the computer revolution here, and now we're getting the timeline and how the speed of revolutions happen and the enormity of the change that takes place is just picking up speed. And so I know all of us like to say, well, we got to get used to change, right? Our organizations are always trying to change and stay on the cutting edge. But the way he paints it is like, if you have any you don't like change, you better buckle your seatbelt, because we are going to speed up the way business and cybersecurity are transformed in the future. And so it's just a really great visual session. He's got tons of video and everything else. And he's also teaching a side course as well, what we call a plus course, which is a deeper dive. And he does some future casting, is what he calls it. And it's basically helping your organization map out where you want to go. So you build the future you want and avoid the one you don't want. At least that's the way he puts it. So that's the opening keynote. And I know you guys. Right?
So Bruce, Steve is great. He was on Paul Security Weekly last Thursday. Matt was there virtually as well. It was an awesome conversation. I could have sat and talked to Steve for hours. Just an easy person to talk to and very thought provoking. So I encourage folks to definitely check out the workshop and his keynote, because I really enjoyed talking to Steve. So.
And he's got this
what'd you think of his
British
accent, by the way?
Yeah, the beautiful British accent. Yeah,
it's just very soothing no matter what he's saying because of the accent, too.
Did he mention tea and crumpets? No, I don't think he did, right?
Oh, no, we did. Yeah, we did. We talked. We made some joke about that or something. I forget the context, but we did. It's pretty funny.
He was drinking bourbon.
So odd. You guys were joking around?
Yeah, just a bit.
Especially on Thursdays. Yeah, a lot of joking around.
No doubt. So, okay, Matt, go ahead.
Your second keynote, because you got another big keynote speaker coming in for SecureWorld Boston.
And this is so exciting, and not just because his name is Bruce, like mine. Okay, I'm a little biased, I admit, but Bruce Schneier is going to be the lunch keynote on day one in SecureWorld Boston, and he is hands down one of the most requested cybersecurity speakers in North America. And he has a fascinating story to tell, of course. We know this because he's often requested by our advisory council members to say, can you please get Bruce Schneier to speak on the agenda? This is what he's talking about. In his opinion now, computer security is no longer just about data. It's about securing life and property. And he lists a couple of things in this area. He says, number one, data authentication and integrity are going to become more important than confidentiality in the future. So that's one big change he sees. And the other thing that he sees is around regulation. He says right now we are largely regulation free, and that he believes is going to become a thing of the past. And he's going to unpack this. I saw his outline. He's going to unpack the regulation landscape changes kind of like this. He says, no longer will we have a choice between government regulation and no government regulation, right? If the regulator or not, that's the choice now. That's not going to be the choice in the future. At least he doesn't believe so. He says our choice will be between smart government regulation and also stupid government regulation. I can't believe stupid would happen, right, from the government. But he says that's the kind of choice that we're going to be facing in the future. And to frame this, he says we're going to look at past attempts to secure these systems, and then he's going to take us forward, looking at technologies, laws, regulations, economic incentives, and the social norms. That is one big ball of wax that has to do with InfoSec and our future.
Yeah, and the one piece here I think that's important for people to understand is this whole concept of data and data providence, right? Data becomes more important in our future world as we become more connected in this digital economy, digital transformation, whatever you want to call it. And he's right. It's not just about one layer anymore. I mean, how data is created, how it's controlled, the ability to fake data will have potentially huge implications for us in this new world as we move forward. And to his point, that's probably why we see a lot more government regulation coming. We've seen it with aspects of GDPR in Europe. We haven't seen it here in the States yet, but we'll see where things end up. But this whole concept of data providence, I think, is a really important piece for us to think about and how to protect.
Well, in regulation's really interesting, and I know it's kind of funny to hear me say that, but Bruce has some really valid points, and I've been following Bruce's thoughts on IoT specifically, and some of the things he said really just summarize these issues and potential solutions very well. And I think he's right. I agree. There's going to be some level of regulation. We can either have input into that, or we can let legislation just happen and regulation just happen without our input, and that could end up disastrous, right? And I think regulation isn't always bad. And I think a lot of us that have experienced regulation and have a strong feeling about it, it's a negative response. I don't want this regulation. Like, don't regulate this is typically where we go. But there's a lot of regulation that's really good. In fact, I think it was Cory Doctorow that was explaining it to me in a sense that we wouldn't have the infrastructure that we have today if it wasn't for government regulation about how we built all of the telecommunications infrastructure in the United States. He's like, it was actually government regulations and standards that enabled companies to build this infrastructure. So he's like, it's not always bad, but there is the smart, stupid regulation that even Cory will talk about as well and say, yeah, if we don't get involved, there could be some really ridiculous pieces of legislation that are bad in terms of, what it wants to regulate. And I've certainly experienced those in a lot of different industries. And I think Bruce is on to something else. We largely have not been regulated as an industry. The FTC has done some, taken some action against actually IoT manufacturers, but it's very, very few and far between.
Yeah, that's for sure. You guys both raised great points. And that is interesting. It kind of reminds me, Paul, what you were talking about is, do you want input or not? The California Consumer Privacy Act. So it's not necessarily just security. It's largely focused on privacy with some security elements in there. And that actually security or some big data players, some big tech companies gave money to kind of fight off a ballot initiative in California, which was this California Consumer Privacy Act. And the legislature within a mere number of days said, that's it. We're not going to have this fight. We're going to pass this regulation right now as it is, put it into place in 2020 and fix, kind of have the dialogue between now and then about what this should contain. And so it's the kind of thing where industry said, we don't want any regulation. And the legislator said, too bad, we're doing it. Now, do you want some input? And it is. It's always a tension, right? So we'll see how that goes. And one other thing, too, that Bruce is going to be doing, he is going to be signing copies of his latest book. I think you guys know, obviously, he's a big author. It's a very happy title. It's called Click Here to Kill Everybody.
Well, and I think my prediction is that Bruce is probably making the correlation between health and public safety and security, which is, if we look in history, right, the FDA was created because there's health and public safety issues with things like pharmaceuticals, for example, or the food and beverages that we consume. And I think where it's going is the security of the Internet of Things, systems, and all of that is also playing into that as well. Therefore, one can assume that there'll be more regulation.
Yeah, because it's a safety component now,
Correct.
right? It's protecting the safety and well-being
Yep.
of us as citizens. That's why I think the regulation is coming in some form or fashion. The question will be, how much is it about safety and wellness versus it is about specific security controls, et cetera, et cetera. And that will be the interesting balance, I think, that we'll have to see as these regulations come to the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we go forward, right, we know that, kind of like Steve Brown was talking about, there's going to be rapid change. And Bruce is saying that's largely going to be on the regulation front. And we're on new territory, right? I mean, think about AI, think about the implications, as you just pointed out, Matt, the link between life and cybersecurity. It's not just data anymore. Now it's about physical security in many cases. And so, yeah, we're on uncharted territory, and it'll be interesting to see Bruce's thoughts and how it shakes out in the future as well.
Agreed.
You have the plus sessions as well. I think there's one plus session on the Nist cybersecurity framework you wanted to talk about, because there's still a lot of interest in kind of how do I build a security program. Nist is kind of one of those places people look to get a guidance on how to build out their security program.
Yeah, this is really interesting. The Nist cybersecurity framework just turned 5 years old this year. And it has had tens of thousands of downloads around the world. So it's not just making American or Canadian companies more secure. It's having an impact around the globe, which is really fascinating. And this is a plus course, which is an extra course for extra CPE credits, a deep dive, you might think of it. And it's going to be taught by Larry Wilson, who is the CISO at UMass, University of Massachusetts. He's also an adjunct professor there. And it is our most popular SecureWorld Plus course that we've ever offered at SecureWorld. And the reason for that is the popularity of the Nist framework. So he is going to be looking at not only the key components, he's going to be looking at all the ways that the Nist framework maps to the attack surface, which is extremely helpful, right, in defending yourself. But he's also going to look at how to build it. What if you have built it and you want to mature it, that framework within your organization, and all kinds of other things. I mean, it's 3 sessions, and those sessions fall outside the main hours of the conference, so you don't miss anything. But if you are part of the Nist course and you attend the conference, you earn 16 CPEs in 2 days' time. So it's a huge boost for those of you who need CPEs. And it's going to be a fantastic conference. I've read the reviews because Larry has taught this course before. Last year he did, as a matter of fact, at SecureWorld Boston. And it was like 5 stars all the way across. So if you use Nist, this is something for you to consider as a resource to help you more fully implement it and get the most out of it. And it's interesting, in interviewing Larry Wilson, when you talked to him, I said, why do you love the Nist framework? Because he's a huge advocate. And he says, number one reason I love it is not only does it map to the attack surfaces, which he's a big fan, but he says the other thing is it is a living document. It's not designed to operate in a vacuum. And that's the reason that I love it. It actually applies to what you're doing, and that's always helpful. So that's what that course is about.
Yeah, it's interesting in all of my briefings and advisory roles with various enterprises. Well, one common theme was everyone is in search of a standard or framework to help guide them, right? And I caution people that you shouldn't take it literally, and if you do everything in the guideline or standard, don't consider yourself done when it comes to security either. But there is that reoccurring theme where people need a starting place. They need some kind of guide to get them on the right path, is how you should think of it. Now, some people make the mistake and think, all right, that's all I need to do, or I just, am implementing everything in here and I'm good. I don't need to do anything else. And maybe some of those things don't apply to you, but it gets people on the right path. And that's what I find a lot of folks searching for is, a starting place and a path to go down. And I think that's what the Nist frameworks do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the challenge. And we've heard this from leaders, conferences, is how do you decide which road to go down, which path are you going to take? And so, Paul, you're right. This is one of those options for sure.
Yeah, security is a process. It's not a project. It's ongoing. And as we transform our technology and the way we're deploying technologies, new risk areas come into play all the time. And that's why it's a process, because you have to reevaluate the controls you have in place. Are they still applicable? Do I need to apply new ones? The framework gives you a really good starting point, but you may not adopt it all day one because you're not using certain technologies. But a year or 2 years from now, you are, and it helps you kind of transition from maybe controls that are no longer applicable to a new set of controls because of the way I've transformed my technology stack, for example. So I think it's a great way to frame up where do I start, but also how do I evolve as my environment evolves, and that's that ongoing process side of security.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. And actually, it reminds me of another session that's actually on the agenda that is being led by Esmond Kane, who's the deputy CISO of Partners Healthcare, which is a large organization there in the Massachusetts area. And he is going to be talking about this idea of transforming security and a large, complex enterprise. Like, how do you do that? He has actually helped pioneer a program that they've used at this healthcare company. And you can imagine, right, not only the protected information they have, all those health records and everything else, but the treasure trove of data that exists at any healthcare organization. And he is going to be talking about what they call their partner Lighthouse program. And this is something that they have developed and implemented. And again, this goes along with transformation, like you were talking about, to get everyone in the organization to play a part in securing the organization, to give them buy-in, right? To give them tools and channels they can use to actually be a part of that process. And he says this goes for the nurses, for the people who are, all the technologists they have there of various types, for the doctors, the whole team, getting everybody involved. And that's certainly a challenge, right? For most CISOs we talk to, that is the challenge. How do you get everybody to help hold that risk, sharing it, and what does that look like where the rubber meets the road? So really excited about that session too.
That's great because I think in the healthcare space, I mean, if you think about all the areas for potential threats and attacks, I mean, those hospitals primarily open. There's lots of devices in there. There's lots of people in and out visiting people. I mean, it's got to be really hard to secure one of those organizations. And you've got visiting nurses, you have active nurses, same on the doctor side. I mean, there's a lot of places where stuff could break down. I bet that's a pretty interesting session on how do you bring all those people together and really help try to create a more secure environment, because I can't see a hospital being that easy.
And that would be, yes, it is very challenging. I've interviewed a lot of healthcare CISOs and VPs of InfoSec at our cybersecurity conferences, and that is the reality of it. They have a huge IoT attack surface as well within healthcare. That's another big challenge they're facing. And so it's just great to see everybody sharing best practices, and hopefully we can all learn a little bit from a lot of different organizations, in our vertical or across verticals, and secure the region, one company at a time, right?
Yeah, definitely. That sounds like a lot of great content for 2 days. Paul, any other questions for Bruce while we have him?
No, I think I'm good. I definitely encourage our listeners to check out SecureWorld. If not in Boston, in your areas, you have conferences. Is it across the globe or it's just the U.S., Bruce?
Well, it is North America just this year. We are launching Toronto, which is on April 24th. Very excited about that. And in the fall, we're also launching New York City. So we're in 17 regions, and it is very purposeful that we're region by region.
Right.
So we can help security leaders build, the regional network.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great. Bruce, thank you for joining us on Business Security Weekly. If anyone wants to learn more about the Secure World event, please visit SecureWorldExpo.com. Thank you for joining us. RSA conference is next week, so we'll see you in 2 weeks on Business Security Weekly.